Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. I'm Creative Katie, Karen Burchill. In today's video tutorial, I am going to show you that card making doesn't have to be difficult, doesn't require a lot of supplies. We're going to keep it super simple, and I'm going to give you 4 different examples. And I'm going to use napkins as the base of all of them. Here's the names: Sakura, Cyan, Pansies, and Sunny Wildflowers all come from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. There's a link in the description box below. So the first step, you want to release the focal image from the napkin shape. So I just rough cut it out, and then you are going to want to remove the 2 excess plies of napkin from each one. I don't necessarily show that. Once it's released from the napkin square shape, you can play with it on whatever substrate that you're choosing to work on. Now, today I'm making all cards, but this could be on canvas boards, it could be on an art journal page as well. So don't limit yourself to cards because that's what I'm doing. So here I'm just taking this. I want this branch off this Sakura napkin. And so I'm just cutting it out, and that just allows me to addition it and get a better idea of what it's going to look like. I'm visual. I need to see things before I can make my decision. Now, some napkins have things going in different perspectives, from the left, from the right, as is the case with this Sakura napkin. We have one leading to the left and one leading to the right. I'm cutting out both, and then I'm playing on the various substrates. I have a 5x7 card, a 6x6 card base, and one that is kind of 4x6. It's kind of an offshoot, but that's what I'm using today. So again, I'm releasing it. Now, sometimes there are stamped, like the brand is on there, and you want to either avoid that or you're going to have to paint over it. Either works. I'm just avoiding it to make it super simple. So here I'm cutting this one, and I'm keeping that rectangular shape because this one isn't white in the background. It's got that yellow green, and I love that. So I want to keep it. So I'm going to treat that one a little bit different. Now, each of these cards, I do something different in them to give you options. Because even the supplies I use, you can change it up and still make the cards. Now, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with this Cyan napkin. I love the colors, but I'm not sure. If you like and appreciate these free tutorials, please hit that subscribe button to help me promote and build my channel. Another thing, share it with your creative friends. Now let's get back to the cards. So this napkin, I want to keep that rectangular shape. I am simply going to glue it down to the card base here. So I want to add that white border. I like that look. So I have my Tim Holtz cutter, guillotine cutter. This is a mini one, and I love it. It's great for this kind of purpose. Now I've left on the plies to use the cutter. I will take off the plies afterwards, but it'll be easier to cut, easier to manipulate if you leave the plies on while you're cutting it. Just a word to the wise. So there, I'm looking, I'm just trying. Now, there is no magic measurement. It's what you like. So I'm thinking I want a little bit more of a border, so I'm just going to take another strip off the napkin. I don't do measurements so well. I don't have a set formula. I am not a card maker. I am a mixed media art journaler. The Sakura one, I have peeled off the excess napkins. Now I'm going to water cut. I am going to glue this down onto the background, and I don't like the straight edges. Even though this one it has a white background, so in all likelihood, it's going to mostly fade and disappear, become very translucent when I glue it down. I like the deckled edge that you get when you water cut, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm putting a little bit of water on my liner brush, soaking it in the paper, and that just allows you to pull out the napkin, and you get this raw edge that just disappears better, especially if you have a colored background. And for the Sakura napkin, I end up colorizing the background. So it just doubles up and makes sure. I'm going to do the same with the pansies napkin. Just getting rid of any of the bulk. I'm not too worried about getting right up to the edge of the pansy because it is white and it's going to disappear. But I want to get rid of excess and I want that deckled kind of edge. And even now, once you've done that, you have a better idea of what it's going to look like on the substrate that you have picked, be it an art journal page or a card like me. Now I have these envelopes that I've just made with copy paper folded and taped around the edges, and I just slide the card in there, and that just keeps the gunk off the card. I'm a messy creator. Now I want to glue this down, and my adhesive of choice is Fluid Matte Medium. It's the Liquitex brand. I just have a lot of success with it, but you can use Mod Podge or Decoupage or whatever you have, and even gel medium. I'm putting a layer underneath, and then I'm going to place the napkin, put it down gently with my fingers, and then I'm going to put a layer of the adhesive, in my case, the Fluid Matte Medium, on top. Now I'm using a soft brush. I don't want it hard because the napkin, when it gets wet, becomes very fragile and is very easy to rip. In fact, I do kind of rip it a little bit later on, and I have to show you how to fix that. There's always a workaround. Now I'm putting a layer on top because I am sealing it because I am going to do some kind of colorization or overpainting. Now with this Sakura one, I decided I am going to colorize the background, and I'm using a combination of white gesso and unbleached titanium, and I'm going to apply that onto the raw card with a makeup sponge. I'm getting a mottled look. I don't want it all over. I just want a little bit of color, and I'm going a little bit vintage with the feel of this card. Now the other cards, I don't do anything in the background, but this is an option for you. But if you put any color down, even something as faint as this, it is going to maybe change the napkin. Now I want to add a little bit more detail, so I grab this Tile Mania stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. There's a link to their Shopify store and a coupon code in the description box. And I'm using Naples yellow. There's a little bit of yellow in that cherry blossom focal image. And I just want a little bit of interest in my background, so I'm doing some stenciling. Then I grab, an all-time favorite, a script stamp, and I'm stamping here. It's a dark brown. There's again that brown in the focal image, so I'm pulling the colors out of it and putting it into the background. You want everything to work together. I'm stamping it, placing this on. I'm being mindful of where that focal image is going to be glued down because I don't want something really dark coming through because it's going to distort my picture. So my stamping and my stenciling is very, very light. And again, I'm using the matte medium and gluing this down. Being very gentle so I don't disturb anything. I decide once that's down that I wanted a little bit more patterning in this corner, so I just grab that stencil and add something. It's never too late to add. So you don't have to worry about getting everything absolutely right minute one. So this one I'm going to glue down basically the whole rectangle, and I'm going to do the iron decoupage technique here. And in order to do that, what you need to do on the card base or whatever substrate you're working on is put a generous coat of Fluid Matte Medium, Mod Podge, Decoupage. I've used Fluid Matte Medium from Liquitex and Mod Podge very successfully. I have not used other brands, so I'm anticipating that they will work the same. Here's the Mod Podge that I've used. Use what you have, at least attempt it. I'm Trying to make sure there's no globs on here because I don't want any of that to show. I don't want any texture added from this. And then this needs to dry. You can use a heat tool to dry it. Now, these two, I did not use the decoupage, iron-on decoupage technique. And there are some wrinkles, and I'm typically okay with that. But because I've turned on my mini iron, you can take this after you glue this down. If there's too many wrinkles, heat up your mini iron or your regular iron, put a layer of parchment paper and iron it. And it works. It gets rid of those wrinkles even at this stage. So if you have an iron, this is what you can do. If you don't, you can do it the way I've showed. There's no more wrinkles there. You want to be careful when you pull up the parchment paper, just in case it's stuck. But even where there's Mod Podge or the adhesive on the card, it doesn't cause any problems. I'm using a emery board that I got at Dollar Tree to remove any of the excess napkin and cutting up, but you can use scissors too. So here, this one has a lot of wrinkles. And again, I have the iron out. It's heated up. I'm going to use it, but you don't have to remove the wrinkles. In fact, I rather think it adds just another layer of interest to the project. And again, I'm giving you options. So with this wildflowers one, I'm peeling off the 2 extra layers. Remember, you have to do that no matter what. Straightening out the napkin. And I find the iron decoupage technique for this, when you have just the rectangular solid shape, a very definite shape, and you want to make sure the borders are even, it's just a little easier than trying the glue down. So could I have done the iron decoupage on these two? Absolutely. But you don't have to. There's always a way around it. You just have to adjust accordingly. So put the parchment paper on and iron it in place. So this one is like super easy. I cut it into rectangular shape using my guillotine cutter, and I'm using the iron decoupage technique to glue it down. Look how beautiful that is. Who needs to go and buy cards when you can make them this easily? And yes, you can use the iron decoupage technique on an art journal page. So here I am putting a coat of the fluid matte medium because I'm going to do that iron-on decoupage technique with this other one. When I cut this strip, I got thinking, what if I made kind of a band out of this napkin? What would that look like? So I kind of folded the napkin and placed it on there. Just kind of this beautiful floral colors in the middle. And then you could put a sentiment on top or underneath or both, as the case may be. So I got out my guillotine cutter. Remember, keep those plies on while you're using it. You can use a rotary cutter to cut napkins. Use a metal ruler to get a straight line if you don't have a guillotine cutter. Little too wide, I'm thinking. You can always cut off more. You can't put on if you cut too small. So I always tend to err on the side of caution. I'm loving how that looks. And then I have this piece that I could do the same, and I could do a series of cards, all that are the same but different. And it's given me some other ideas for using napkins and cutting them up, but you'll have to wait for another video for that. So I could go this way or that way. I could put it higher or lower. This card base came from Michael's. It is a very cheapy one. It doesn't take mixed media very well. I'm simply using it up. Put the parchment paper on and iron it in place. I love my mini iron. I'll link to one that is similar. You might not be exact in the links below. So here are the cards. And you know what? As they are, you can just grab a sentiment and add it to the card or not. And you can call it done at this stage. They look lovely. talk about super simple. I'm going to take it a couple more layers. Now, all these sentiments come from my short and sweet digital sentiment pack that's available at NINNYSNAPKINS.com. It's a great one to add to cards because the phrases are 1, 2, 3, 4 words at most and multiple occasion or non-occasion kind of things. And you can resize them to fit whatever substrate you're working on. Let's continue with the cards. So I am going to overpaint the cherry blossoms, and I'm going to use white gesso and quinacridone magenta acrylic paint. So to start off, I'm just using a round brush, nothing too fancy here, and I'm adding some gesso in the lighter parts of the napkin focal. I'm not being overly careful. I just want to brighten it up. I'm adding texture and I'm making it look like I've painted it, not that it's a napkin. Do not overthink this. Flowers, for the most part, especially if they're more abstract, not like a picture flower, but kind of painted or watercolor, are really, really easy to do this and are very forgiving. And the more you do, the better you get at this. So I'm just adding the white gesso. And then without waiting it to dry, I'm watering down the magenta and dropping it in, almost using it like watercolor. Speaking of which, you can use watercolor here. I'm not going to add wet layers on top. So using a color medium that is not permanent is okay at this stage and in this application. Now I've decided I'm adding a little bit of that Naples yellow. Remember, I stenciled with it in the background, and I'm just changing the tone a little bit of these cherry blossoms. And I'm just adding and tweaking. And again, I'm making it my own. You can change the color, strengthen the color, all sorts of things. Then I mix up some brown acrylic paint and I begin just making the stems of the cherry blossoms stand out a little bit more. And then I'm adding a little bit of brown on the flowers as well. That's tying into my hope, turning this look, making it look a little bit more vintage. And then I'm shading around the edge with the brown acrylic paint, again, to add to that vintage feel. And here I'm adding a little bit of shading in the centers of the blossoms. Then I grab my micron pen and I'm adding back those, are they stamens? The centers that make the cherry blossom the cherry blossom. I'm just adding that in. Now, before you use the micron pen, you need to make sure that the paint and everything is completely dry or you will kill that nib. But interesting enough, this micron pen I've had for years. I have not used it for years and it still works. So that's a win for me. So I'm just adding those in, making them stand out just that little bit more. I stamped the script with black and that's really tying it all in. Then I'm adding a little bit of shading on the flowers. Now I'm using black to shade here, but I'm thinking as I'm watching this back that I could have used some magenta or a little bit of black with magenta. Oh, there's always next time. Remember, I've got 4 more sections of that same napkin, so I can make 4 cards from one napkin, all pretty much the same. I'm gluing the sentiment down with my fluid matte medium, Secura glaze pen, and I'm just drawing a sketchy line around the outside. The Secura glaze is dimensional and glossy, and I love adding it onto the cards. Then I decide I'm going to dot the ends of those stamens, if that's the correct word, on there. And that's just going to add a little bit of shine, a little bit of dimension, a little bit of extra to it. If you don't have the Sakura glaze, which I do highly recommend, you can just use a Posca pen. And look at that. They shine, they shimmer. How pretty. Now with this one, again, I put on the sentiment, you can leave it at that. But I'm using my inktense blocks and just adding a little bit of color on top. Now remember, we put a coat of fluid matte medium on top to seal it and turn that napkin into a non-porous surface. That means if I'm overpainting with inktense blocks or watered down acrylics, it's not going to just wick out weirdly. It's going to stay where you put it and it's going to be like watercolor. And again, if you don't have inktense blocks, you can use watercolor if that's what you have. I love the inktense blocks because they are permanent. Now with this one, I am going to shade top and bottom right across that band just to kind of frame it. And I'm using black acrylic paint. Now I'm doing it on the sides, and my napkin didn't quite go to the edge of the card, so I could have cut the card, but I'll fix that later. Here, I was going to leave it the same, but I decided I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the cherry blossoms. I'm adding white gesso to some of the lighter spots, and then I'm going to come in, not with acrylic paints as watered down, but the inktense blocks, just to show you that you can use different color mediums to colorize it. So I'm just dipping into rubbing my brush on the block and painting, adding it to my focal image. I'm really darkening this up, making the colors a little bit more vibrant. And because the center is so dark now, and I've lost those dots that were there, I grab my fine line applicator. This is a great tool to have. It's got thinned acrylic paint in it. And I'm just adding the dots for the center of the flower. This is adding a little bit of dimension and a nice little detail to this. And it's, again, super simple to do. And I use my fine line applicators for doodling, for doing line work on my art journal pages. So it's, again, a tool that I use. Everything that I'm using here, you cannot use it and get the same effect making the cards, but they are basic supplies that I would not do without. So here's how I'm hiding the little faux pas of the napkin not going to the edge. I just used my Sakura glaze and trimmed it. So I could be dare to be different or laugh out loud. And I am loving this band across the card. So you could take one napkin, cut it into, 3 different parts and make 1/4 of the napkin and cut it into 3 different bands on 3 different cards. So just think of how much value you'll get out of your napkins. And while I love these napkins, and there's some of the newest ones from Ninny's Napkins, any floral napkin would work in here. So I am colorizing the pansy napkin as well, and I'm using my Inktense blocks this time. I'm not adding any gesso. I want to keep it very translucent. I just want to build up the color. Now, right there on that pansy, I end up actually, the napkin gets wet right here, and I end up ripping the napkin, or it kind of, some of it comes up. So I'm going to be showing later how I fix that problem easily. It's not really such a problem, just one more thing to do. So I'm just adding color, changing the colors again, brightening them up. So on this pansy, when I get in here, I ripped the napkin. It got too wet and it lifted a little bit, and that happens sometimes. So I'm kind of cleaning it up here, removing some of the excess napkin, and then I'm going to fix it by painting. So I left this in to show you it doesn't always work, but you know what? it isn't a tragedy. It isn't a big deal. So here I'm trying to add color and I'm just painting in the shape. And I realized that just the Inktense blocks alone isn't quite giving me the look that I want. So I'm grabbing some gesso and I'm filling that gap in with white gesso. I let that dry a little bit. And then I'm going to come back and paint it out. So to add some detail here, I am going to use some glossy accents. And I'm just putting it in, is it the face of the pansy here, that center part. And if you put lots on, it's shinier and more dimensional, or you can put as little as you want. And again, this is extra. If you don't have this, don't panic. You can use gloss fluid medium or pouring medium, and that will give you a glossy look to these areas. You might have to paint them on with a paintbrush, but if you have some glossy accents, this is a way to take a very simple card and very quickly and easily add something special to it. And look at that. The shine, the shimmer, this dries perfectly clear and it will be shiny. So it's just that little extra special. So again, well worth it. Since I had it out and I was loving the look, I went on to this one and just did the yellow parts just for a little shine, and then the center part of this one. You could do one flower or three flowers. You could do parts. So here is the card. There we can, hopefully you can see the shimmer from the glossy accents. Very, very simple. I love that. That is so simple. Love this band across the middle. Definitely something I am going to use moving forward in making cards. Couldn't be easier. The Sakura Glaze, this one has a background. We did a lot more on this one. You could have done it as simple as the other ones as well, or you could have done backgrounds on the others. And these pansies with that glossy accents looks lovely. So I've given you some ideas. I hope you take those, add your own ideas to that. This is just the jumping off point, but don't overthink it. Card making can be super simple and doesn't require a lot of things or just requires what you already have in your stash. Enjoy the close-ups. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, subscribe to my channel, and share this channel with your creative friends. Until next time, go get creative.